Greetings and salutations. Welcome to Knife Chats with Tobias. Hey everybody, Tobias here. Let's talk Bowie knives. Why am I showing this one first? Well, this is the one that basically started this video off. You see, about a month ago or so, Skip had mentioned on his channel that he thought that this was one of my favorite Bowie knives, and I commented back to him that I'm not even sure if this one falls within my top 3 Bowie knives. And he commented that, oh, okay, fine. And then later he mentioned that I was going to be doing a video on my top 3 Bowie knives. And, well, here I am doing that video. I don't know if I'm going to be able to actually pick a top 3. I'm looking at the guard here. It's got some staining on there. Got to get Skip to stop putting my knives in his mouth. Anyway, I don't know if I'm going to be able to choose the top 3, but I thought what I would do is go through some of the Bowie knives that I do own, and I'll be looking at about 8 or 9 that would fall into potential top 3 Bowie knives in my collection, and that's going to surprise you a little bit. But now, before I even get into that, let's define just what is a Bowie knife, at least in my mind, because everyone has their own definition of what a Bowie knife is, including Jim Bowie, because, well, I think as far as Jim Bowie is concerned, a Bowie knife was any knife that Jim Bowie happened to be carrying. And he had more than one. In any case, with that said, let's move on to what I think is a Bowie knife. And I'm going to do that by showing what I believe is the definitive Bowie knife of the 20th century. And that is this knife right here. This is patterned after the W49 Bowie knife by Western. And it's often referred to as the Western Bowie, because, well, Western Knife Company made it. They were out of Boulder, Colorado, and this was the W49 Bowie knife. And it was a very popular knife from the moment it came out. And what you have in there is everything that I think of when I hear Bowie knife. First of all, you got a big blade. In this case, the blade is about 9 1/4 inches long. And for me, in order for it to be a proper Bowie knife, the blade has to be at least 9 inches long. I guess I will give it a little wiggle room and say 8 7/8 inches, but at least 8 7/8 inches long. If it's under that, forget it. And I'm giving that 1/8 of an inch wiggle room for the thought that maybe the blade was ground improperly, or maybe the blade has been sharpened, something of that nature, and that has reduced the length of the blade, or possibly in use the blade tip got broke. So maybe those are some of the things that would cause the blade to be a little shorter than that. But the original blade has to be at least 9 inches long. If you find it a little shorter, I'm not going to hold it against them completely, as long as it meets all the other criteria. And one of them is the swedge up here. It's nice if it has a swedge. It definitely has to have a clip. It needs that clip blade, but a swedge is even better. And what's even better than a swedge is if this is actually sharpened, so a false edge. And unfortunately, I do not think I have a single Bowie knife that has the false edge, which would be what a lot of people refer to as a sharpened swedge. But that's the other thing I like to see in it, is this swedge being sharpened or a false edge, but definitely a clip blade. The swedge is a nice touch, but it definitely has to have the clip. Finally, well, not finally, next, a 5-inch handle. At least a 5-inch handle, so that you can grip it properly and gives it a little bit better balance. So the overall length of the knife now, it has to be at least 14 inches. So 5-inch handle, 9-inch blade, 14 inches. Next, it should have a full guard. The full guard, I'm a little iffy on that. I can handle it as long as it has a guard to protect the hand from sliding up on the blade. But a full guard is even better. So the full cross guard is what I'm really looking for in a Bowie knife. When I see this definitive profile, this is what I think of when I think of Bowie knife. And so knives that look like this and knives that are about this big are Bowie knives. If it's got a bigger blade, that's even better. To me, if somebody were to say a small Bowie knife, this is what I would refer to as a small Bowie knife, because it just barely meets the parameters that I'm talking about. It's got a 5-inch handle, it's got a 9-inch blade or a 9¼ inch blade. That's a small Bowie knife to me. You give it, maybe a 10 or 11-inch handle or a 10 or 11-inch blade. Now you're talking like a medium Bowie knife. When you get that blade over a foot long, then you're talking about a large Bowie knife to me. This is a small Bowie. Most people, when you hear small Bowie, they're thinking more of something like, let's see here, this little colonial knife here. Now, this has like a 4.5-inch handle maybe and a 5-inch blade. And it does have a full cross guard that actually acts as a cap lifter and also a can piercer over here. But this is more of a camp knife to me. I would never think of this as a Bowie knife, but people will call this a small Bowie knife because it has the basic shape of a Bowie knife, but really that's more of a camp knife. Another knife that people will refer to as either a small Bowie or a medium Bowie is this knife right here. And this has a 7¼ inch blade, or 7-inch blade rather, 5-inch handle. It's got the right length of a handle, but the blade is a little short. It's a 7-inch blade. One of my favorite knives in my collection. Obviously, I've shown it enough times. I really like this knife, but to me, this doesn't quite fit into the category of a Bowie knife. It has the full cross guard and everything, and it is a fighting knife. They refer to it as a combat knife. They refer to it as a fighting knife. It's the Marine Corps K-bar, they also will call it, things like that. But for me, this is still more in the line of just another hunting knife. It's got to be bigger for it to be considered a true Bowie, in my opinion. Now, that is me. That's not everyone else out there. A lot of people will look at that and go, yeah, that is the definitive Bowie knife. This is the definitive Bowie knife. And that's okay. I don't have a problem with people thinking that way. I'm not here to change anybody's mind. But I know in my mind what I think of and what I see when I hear the word Bowie knife. Now, with that said, let's get moving forward with some of these other knives in this collection of Bowie knives, and then I'll see if I can actually choose a top 3 within there. Okay, the first knife, let's just get it out of the way. This is not one of my top 3 Bowie knives, but it is one that I definitely need to show, and that is the Jim Frost Undertaker 3 Bowie. Now, first of all, it meets all the defining characteristics of a Bowie knife. The blade is well over 9 inches long. It's closer to about 10.5 inches. It has a sharpened swedge also. In fact, it is a serrated swedge up there, which gives another form of cutting on there. And obviously a full guard here, and then a handle that is over 5 inches long. So it definitely fits the category of a Bowie knife, but it also falls more into the fantasy Bowie category. And it is a really nice looking fantasy Bowie, in my opinion. One of those knives that Jim Frost was exceedingly proud of. And you will see that there's an entire family of knives that use this handle from Jim Frost. And you'll be seeing those knives in an upcoming video from Fun Knife Friday. Skip will be showing that. And so I'm just letting him talk about those, but I did want to mention the Undertaker 3 Bowie because you see it a lot on the channel, and it's a fun knife. And in the category of fun Bowie knives, I have to give props to this. I really do like it. And there is a video out there where somebody actually chops up a bunch of wood and all sorts of other stuff with it. And so it can take a beating too. So do I find it practical? Not necessarily, but most of these other Bowie knives I also did not find extremely practical because I'm not going to be fighting a bear or going in combat or anything else where I need an exceedingly large blade like that. But with that said, let's move on to the other knives in the Bowie collection, and then we'll try and choose a top 3. I'm not sure if I've shown this one on the channel or not. This is the Rough Rider RR 2007. It is made in Pakistan, and it is very similar to an old Colt knife that was known as the Alamo Bowie. So I'm going to just refer to it as the Alamo Bowie. However, this knife probably looks nothing like any of the Bowie knives that were at the Alamo. You notice it has an S-guard. Stylized S-guard going on there, and S-guards are a nice thing to have because the way this is shaped, it's designed to deflect the blade away, and this side is designed to catch an oncoming blade, so it protects your hand real well, and it also protects your hand from slipping up on the blade. But what I also like about this knife is right here. You've got a finger choil in front of the guard, so you can actually lock in when you're not having to worry about a blade sliding up on the handle or something. And you can actually use the knife like so, which really aids in chopping. So you can chop a little bit better. Your hand is really locked into place, and it feels comfortable doing that. So that is a nice little feature on this knife. I also like the shape of the handle, the way it bends out back here. It does have a lanyard loop here, or a lanyard, what do they call, lanyard tube going back here, which is interesting, but it also looks like there is an obstruction in there, so it's not perfectly clear how it's in there. But a pretty cool little knife. Supposed to have 440A stainless steel blade, and feels comfortable. It's relatively light, easy to move in the hand, and got a blade that this is one of those that is just barely making it a Bowie knife, in that the blade is right at 9 inches long. Depending on how you measure it, if you were to measure just the cutting edge on here, then the blade would be definitely under 9 inches. But I'm measuring from hilt to tip of point, and that is a 9-inch blade, so that's pretty cool. And definitely a 5-inch handle, so 14 inches overall. This is probably the smallest of my Bowie knives because the blade just barely makes that 9-inch mark. But still, a nice knife, handy to hold. And got multiple grip uses. Where's the balance point? Balance point is just in front of the guard. So that might be why it is easy to hold also. Let's move on to the next one. This one, you can have debate on if it is a Bowie knife or not. I am going to show it. If nothing else, it is definitely an honorable mention in the Bowie category. It is double-edged, but the blade is more of a spear point blade, as you can obviously tell there. This blade is actually 9 1/4 inches long, and the handle is slightly more than 5 inches. The overall length of this knife comes in at 14 3/4 inches long. It was sold as the Hudson Bay Fur Trader's toothpick, but these styles of knives are more commonly referred to as an Arkansas toothpick. And it's a nice knife to show in comparison to your typical Bowie knives. So you can see here the difference between the two. The difference mainly is in the clip blade going on there, and the fact that you have sharpened edges all the way up on the toothpick, whereas usually you only have like 1 1/4 sharpened edges on a Bowie knife at best, sometimes a little bit more, but always it's just one edge is really sharp and you have a solid spine up here. So that is the big difference between the toothpicks. A proper toothpick will have both edges sharpened. You do see the full guard going on there, and this is a beaver tail handle going on in the back here. And this is definitely one of my favorite knives with a blade that's over 9 inches long. Would it be one of my favorite Bowie knives? That depends on where you fall in categorizing it. If this is a Bowie knife, then this is probably one of my favorite. Not so much because of the blade steel or anything else. It's mainly just because of the style. All of this is coming down to the way the knife looks and the way it feels in my hand. And this knife has a really good feel in the hand. You got the balance point, once again, right at the guard. Yeah, it's a little handle heavy right here, depending on where it is, but the balance point is truly right at the guard, right there. And so that's really good. I can get a finger in front there, but I don't feel safe doing it because that's just not enough choil. You can see right there. Would my hand slip? Possibly, but I'm pulling back at the time I'm doing that. But I always like the toothpicks, the large Arkansas style toothpicks, and that's why I bought this one. This was one of the best looking Arkansas toothpicks that I've seen. Yeah, it's still a bit of a wall hanger. The reason you're not seeing the Cougar knife in this video is because it's only got a blade that's 8 inches long, so it's not long enough. Notice I referred to it as the Cougar knife. It could be the Cougar toothpick, yeah. But even usually when I think Arkansas toothpick, I'm thinking of a blade that's about 9 inches long or better. But in any case, wanted to show this one real quick. Now let's move on to another one. Now this is my other USA made Bowie knife. This is the Case Bowie knife. Actually they refer to it as the Crockett Bowie, and it's number 1836. Which is the year of the Alamo. That's why they named it or gave it the pattern number 1836. It was supposed to have a brass strip up here, but that has fallen off of the knife. And if you notice, there was some damage done to the blade by whoever owned it before me. There's a little bit of waviness in the blade down here from wherever they were pounding on something. It has a full brass guard. It has like a phenolic handle going on. And the phenolic handle actually has a few cracks in it and a few scratches on it because this was used and everything. Now this one, the balance is right about there, so a little far up, yeah, right there, somewhere right around there. So about 1 inch in front of the guard. And the handle is a little shorter than what I really like. Is it 5 inches? The handle is really only 4.5 inches long, so I'm kind of giving this one a little bit of doubt going on here. This is modeled after the V44. That's usually what they refer to it these days, but it originally began life as a Collins number 18, I believe. And Collins 18 was actually known as a machete. And I don't know if this is a little small for that or not, but not a bad knife and everything. Blade length is long enough to be considered a Bowie. The handle is a little on the short side, but I'm giving this one a benefit of the doubt simply for tradition's sake, because most people have referred to this as a Bowie for a long time, and the blade is the right length. And the handle kind of works, but I tell you, between the two of these, this one feels a whole lot more comfortable in the hand to me. And I also just like the way this guard works a little bit better. So, and also just the blade geometry, I like it a little bit better too. Neither one of them have a sharp edge up here. This is just a swedge. Thick blade though, very thick blade, but kind of a little small on the Bowie side to me. Moving on to the next one, where will I go? Okay, I think what I'll break out now is this one here, which is referred to as the scimitar Bowie. And this is the knife that I actually made from a blade blank that I bought from Smoky Mountain Knife Works probably a good 10 years ago. And it's a pretty big chunk of steel going on here. It probably looks a little smaller because of the size of the handle, but when you realize that this handle is 6 inches long, then you start getting about the right length of the blade here, because the blade is, let's see here, the blade is right at 11 inches long overall. So you've got an 11-inch handle, 11-inch blade and a 6-inch handle going on. So this thing is slightly over 17 inches long because of the guard going on in the middle here. It's a big knife, and it's a little bit heavy, but because of the handle, you have a center point right at the cutting edge here of the blade. And you can get your finger in front there. And so when you do that, you've got a really good balance going on for chopping and everything. And this is really designed more for chopping than stabbing. You do have a clip. It's a very highly stylized clip. This almost falls into the fantasy area. And yeah, I guess I can see how people could see that. There is a slight swedge to the blade. None of this is sharpened up here. It would take forever to try and get that sharpened also. As for the tang, it's got a push tang that goes back to about here, about a 5-inch long push tang, and all the bone had to be drilled out, and I did the drilling by hand. And by push tang, I'm talking about a bar that is about a 1/2 inch wide, and then about the thickness of the blade there. So, it started in here and goes all the way into the handle. So it goes through the guard here too. The guard is slightly S-shaped, brass, and then you've got the triangular piece of cattle bone going on there. Notice how it's triangular shaped. The coin on the end there is a fake 4 real piece, which would be well, half a piece of 8, or not a doubloon. A doubloon was wow, man. I'm not going into all the Spanish coins right now, but this would be what would have been considered a 50-cent piece in the United States at the time, because the piece of 8 was known as the Spanish dollar. You had a 2 real piece, a 4 real piece, and then the piece of 8, which was known as the Spanish dollar. I think they even had a 1 real piece. But you remember the old thing about 2 bits, 4 bits, 6 bits, a dollar? That referred to the rhyme from a long time ago, and that's why we use quarters in the United States, because the 2-bit piece was referring to a quarter of a dollar, and the quarter of a dollar referred to the piece of 8. So the Spanish coins were much more popular in the colonies than the British coinage, and that was another thing that they were fighting about in the Revolutionary War, because in order for American colonists to buy stuff, they needed to use English coins, but most of the commerce in the United States itself was using Spanish coins. In any case, that's why that is there. In any case, there is my scimitar Bowie, and I actually do quite like this quite a bit. I know it's more of a fantasy piece. It does have an edge here. I believe the blade stock is 420 steel, even though it was listed as 440 at the time. In any case, there's my scimitar Bowie, and if nothing else, it's a fun piece. And let's see, I got a couple more to go here. Let's move on right into the big bad boy, and this is what I would consider a big Bowie. This is the D-Guard Bowie. This is also by Rough Rider. It originally came out by Colt. I have already told the saga of this knife before, in that the handle got really loose after I slammed it against a few things. I hacked into some 2x4s with it, and the handle here, this is genuine stag. The genuine stag handle came loose, and it's because basically you have a piece of tang that goes about that far, and then you have a rat tail that ran through the rest of the guard and was screwed into this basically pommel here at the end, and then you had the D guard here. And I was actually able to just untwist this, pop it off, and remove the entire handle, the guard and everything, because of how poor the construction was to put all that together. But what I've done since is I basically filled the entire handle with epoxy, shoved it all back together, screwed it all back together again, and then I had to do some sanding and everything else on the end to get it all to match back up, ground it down a bit, and now that handle is tight as can be. I have once again pounded this thing into some 2x4s. Nothing came loose, including the brass straps on the top there. And got a little file work going on with the brass straps. If you look closely, you will see where these are pinned into this wonderful Damascus blade going on there, or more correctly, pattern welded blade. It is like a teardrop pattern going on, and it is nicely done. So I really like the way this one looks. It is somewhat functional. Definitely a big heavy blade. The balance point is way out here. So if you're talking about something that is blade heavy, you're talking about this thing. What would have made this a little bit better is if it would have had a little bit of a distal tapering going on, so that if the blade had thinned as it went out to the end. As it is, this thing is just a beast. It's got a convex grind for the blade, which is helpful because it's really easy to grind back and get sharp. It is using, I believe, a 1095 carbon steel along with whatever the nickel steel that they also use to make the pattern welding in this blade. Very strong guard going on too, so I'm really happy with this knife now that I repaired it. I was not nearly as happy with it before I fixed the handle. So this is definitely a runner into the top 3 category now that I've repaired it a bit. But man, is it heavy. I would hate to be trying to clear a forest with this, hacking and everything else. This would be a knife that would get you tired very quickly using. Let me put it that way. But for just sheer fear factor, that blade looks scary. There's no doubt about it. You can do that, which adds a little bit of help, but then that negates the whole protection of the D-guard. Do you really want to lose a finger? So, in any case, let's move on to the next couple and then we'll be done. Or at least I should say, then I can make a decision. And that brings us to the Paratrooper Bowie. Now this is a Rough Rider copy of a knife that was designed by John Eck during World War II, but it's a pretty good copy of it. And this is it was also known as the Paratrooper Bowie back in World War II. The big difference between this and the original is the original did not have a lanyard hole drilled through it, and instead of having the 3 brass rivets here, it actually had 3 lead rivets that were designed that if the handle were to get loose, you could just take a hammer, pound in the lead rivets, and tighten the handle back up again. Everything about the knife was designed for field modifications. Among them is the shape of the handle here was just crudely cut out, and then what the knife came with sandpaper so that you could actually fit the knife to your hand. And as you notice, it does not have a full guard. That is probably the only difference between this and all the other Bowies in my collection. But it does have the proper length of a blade. The blade here is almost 10 inches long. The handle is over 5 inches long. And it definitely has a guard that prevents it from slipping up, that prevents your hand from slipping up on the blade. And these originally came in like a stainless steel blade. I can't remember the exact name of the steel that was being used, but it was a steel that was being used for aircraft struts. And it was a steel that was controlled by the government. So Eck had to get approval of the government to use that steel in the blade. This one, however, as you see here, Rough Rider Paratrooper Bowie, is made in El Salvador, and this was actually made in the Condor factory for Rough Rider, and it's using 1070 carbon steel, and it's got a nice satin finish going on. The balance of the blade is right about there. Very thin blade, but very sturdy blade. And this was actually designed in part to be used as a small machete in the South Pacific. And these were knives that were originally supposed to be issued, well, not issued, they were a private purchase item. But the way Eck worked it, the knife could not be purchased unless the person was actually going into combat. They had to proof that they were a parachutist and that they were actually going overseas. So many of these knives did not survive the war because, well, they got used in the war, and it's very difficult to find an actual sheath for one of these. The sheaths are even more rare than the original knife. So if I had an actual John Eck Paratrooper Bowie, that would be like the pride of my collection. That's how much I really like this style of knife and this particular knife. But this is just a Rough Rider copy of it, but it's a darn good copy. So definitely in the runnings for the top 3. Though most people look at it and go, I'm not that impressed with it. I'm more impressed with it because of the history of the knife. And final one that I'm going to show you. This is also one of the more recent ones I picked up, and this is actually by chip-away cutlery. I'm not big on chip-away cutlery, but I did like this one. Came with a decent enough leather sheath, and it is definitely a Bowie knife. This is one of those things that almost defines Bowie to me. It does not have a sharpened swedge up here. It's not a false edge, but you do not find that a lot on a lot of the modern knives, simply because once you have a swedge that is sharp here or a false edge, most municipalities will consider that knife a double-edged knife, and there's many more restrictions on them. So that's why you see a lot of swedges that are not sharpened on clip blades these days, because as soon as you sharpen that clip blade, the knife may become illegal in some places. But what you got here is known as a coffin handle Bowie knife, and that's based on the shape of the handle here. Now this is not the best shape, but it's pretty good. You notice how it goes out, and then you've got the cut there and the cut, and that's basically shaping the end of it as if it were an old-fashioned coffin. And then this one is in white smooth bone, which is a big plus for me, and just got a good blade going on there. It's very simple. Everything about this is very simple in design and function and shape. So I really like this one. You also have the forward finger toil, again, something that's great to lock in when you can do, if you need to do some just chopping or hacking and you're not actually fighting or anything. And it locks the handle in place, which is always good. So I always like to see that on a knife. I know that does shorten the amount of cutting edge, but when you've got a blade that is over 9 inches long, you don't need as much cutting edge as you do when the blade is only 3 inches long. So we've got that going. Good brass guard, and it's a relatively flat brass guard, which I like also. I don't like the ones that are really thick and chunky. So this is a pretty good one, and I bought it mainly because it was a coffin handle Bowie, and I just really liked the way it looked, so I had to grab it even though it was chip away. They did say that this is 448 stainless, and I know a lot of people are going, man, I want a carbon steel blade with those knives, and I get that, but 440 stainless holds up pretty well and is in many ways comparable to 1095 in toughness and things of that nature. So it's not that bad of a steel. Obviously it's not 5160 spring steel, and it's, you know, or S30V or something like that, but imagine how much something like this would cost in S30V, and what are you actually going to be doing with it? This will kill this will kill the same bear that S30V blade would, which means either way we're probably dead. You stab a bear with this knife, he's going to be mad at you and tear you to pieces. You stab a bear with this same identical knife using S30V, he's going to be mad and tear you to pieces. So either way you're dead with the bear fight. With the human, same thing. Whoever stabs you first is probably going to be the winner when you got a blade this long. Anyway, that's my thoughts. Now, the top three, give me a moment to think. Okay, I think I made my decision. At least I made my decision for today. This knife, the Alamo Bowie, it's light, it's nimble. I like the way you can grab it and everything, but I'm not too crazy about the extremely long swedge up here, the long clip. It's not my favorite style or design. I also wish the guard, it should have either been more ornate or less ornate, and the handle is a little thin for me, so I'm passing on that one. The case, good balance to it. The guard is a little thicker than I like, and the handle is a little too short. A lot of people will probably like it. Your hand can, I have I guess a medium hand, I don't know. It fits it all right, but if you had a larger hand, this grip would be very uncomfortable. It's wider than it needs to be and shorter than it should be. So I'm passing on the case as my favorites. The D-Guard Bowie, to be honest, this thing is a brute, and the handle feels good. I like that I can grab it here, but it's just because of how thick the blade is, the fact that there's no distal tapering going on to lighten that blade a bit, it's just too heavy. I would wear myself out using this, so I'm going to pass on that. It looks great, it's just too heavy, and that is one of the problems with the larger Bowie knives, and this is definitely a larger Bowie knife, but the blade stock is just too thick. It's a beast of a knife, but it's just too heavy, so I'm going to have to pass on that as a top. When it comes to looks, very intimidating though. this is probably one of the more intimidating Bowies I have. That brings us to the Western. Well, this one is iconic. It's got a good weight to it, feels good, got a good size handle. The handle helps balance out the blade. I can move it easily. Don't have a front choil. I wish it did, but that is basically the only downside to this one, other than this wedge not being sharpened. So this one is definitely in the keeper range. I would definitely, this is definitely in the running for number 3. As is this knife. Now, this one, they do have the forward finger choil. Blade's a little longer than the Western, and because of that, it is a little heavier than the Western. Balances out about the same place as the Western Bowie is, but the handle is a little smaller than the Western, and that might be a reason why I would choose the Western over this. This has a really nice shape to it and everything, but the handle feels a little too small for the blade, and that might cause issues with gripping and using. Yeah, the finger choil up front helps a little bit, but that slightly smaller bone handle could be a problem. So I'm not sure about that one. I originally said this would not be in my top 3, but right now at this point it is actually in the running for my top 3 because, well, despite its weight, the handle gives a good balance to it. The fact that you can get in front and grip it, the fact that you can also grab it with both hands, and I would feel comfortable using both hands to cut something with it, adds a little bit to this, because this is almost a small sword, could be a machete also, but it's just it's got a good balance to it despite its weight. You can actually move it around easy enough, and you can actually grip it with both hands easily. So, or at least I can grip it with both hands easily, which says something about it. So, but is that because it's a machete though? Anyway, that's definitely in the running, as is this, but I can easily pass on this one because it's an Arkansas toothpick and not your classic Bowie knife. But if I were to throw this in, yeah, this would probably bump one of the other Bowie knives. So if nothing else, this has definitely got a big honorable mention. Really good balance, really good blade shape, easy to control, got a good handle. You can really index the handle real well. It feels good. The blade, really, it feels light. I like the way this feels. And because of it being double-edged, you lose a lot of the steel going down. So it is a nice light blade, even though it's got a very thick center core, which really gives it a lot of good strength. So that one is an honorable mention. It would probably bump my number 3 choice, whichever that third choice would be. Probably my number 3s are right here. I don't know which one I'm going to choose, because as crazy as it sounds, this is my personal favorite of the Bowies. This thing is so light, very lightweight, got a good length of blade. I guess a lot of people look at it and go, that ain't no Bowie, but the only thing that doesn't fit the criteria that I was mentioning is a full crossguard. And that technically is not necessary for a good Bowie knife. A lot of good Bowie knives do not have a full crossguard. They just have a partial crossguard. It does have a clip blade, and it's light. Man, it's stiff. And it's just so light and easy to move. It feels good. You can actually get a finger in front of there too, if you needed to. and it even feels good there. So this is my favorite. 2 or 3. This could be number 2. This could be number 3. So sorry, Skip. You're right. Well, you weren't right. It isn't my favorite, but it is in my top 3. And I thought it would not be in my top 3. But yeah, this is one of my top 3 Bowie knives. And this is also one of my top 3 Bowie knives. This is either second or third. They're like tied for second place. And this would bump one of them, but I just don't know which one. If I were to include an Arkansas toothpick into the Bowie family. And so now I know there's got to be a bunch of Case fans out there going, I cannot believe he passed on this Bowie, the iconic Case Bowie, and chose this. Or even this. Or this. Especially this. But, you know, it's a little bit of personal preference here. And I just like the way certain knives look and the way certain knives feel. And quite frankly, this knife probably ain't going to cut up a watermelon as well as this knife will. Just my opinion. And I'm sure we all have our own opinions on Bowie knives. So, hope you enjoyed this, and I'll talk to you again soon. Let me take just a second to thank you once again for dropping by and spending a few minutes here at Knife Chats with the Pious. I really do appreciate it, and I do appreciate any comments that you leave. So, please remember to give me that thumbs up, and also don't forget to subscribe and ring that notification bell so you'll know when the next episode is up and running. Thanks again for dropping by. Really do appreciate your time here.